Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been working in closed-circuit television monitoring for almost 10 years now. I sit in front of multiple screens watching security cameras at various properties, making sure nothing suspicious is going on. The job requires close coordination with physical security guards who patrol the actual sites we monitor. This story happened right at the start of the pandemic when everything was still chaos and we were all trying to figure out this new normal. Our monitoring center operates around the clock, and since I prefer night shifts, I usually work when most of the world is asleep. It's quieter, less management breathing down your neck, and the pay differential doesn't hurt either. The guards we work with are supposed to call us when they arrive at their assigned properties, when they leave, and before they start their patrol rounds. This keeps us in the loop about any movement we might see on camera so we don't accidentally trigger false alarms. Most guards are professional about these check-ins. Quick, efficient calls that get the job done without wasting anyone's time. But then there was this one guard who worked the West Coast properties. Let's call him Gary since that's close enough to his real name. Gary was probably in his 50s, and from what we could see on the security cameras, he clearly thought he was God's gift to women. The guy even had his own little security business on the side and had created this website where the main photo showed him in his uniform, flexing his biceps like some kind of discount action hero. Gary had given himself the nickname Mr. World Security, which was some play on his company's actual name. He thought it made him sound important and mysterious. Really, it just made him sound like a middle-aged man having a midlife crisis. When Gary called and got one of my female co-workers on the phone, he'd make these inappropriate comments about their voices being pretty or call them beautiful instead of using their actual names. The women would just brush it off and keep the conversation professional because, honestly, we all deal with enough workplace nonsense that this seemed relatively minor. But Gary started getting bolder over time. His comments became more frequent and more personal. Instead of quick check-in calls, he'd try to extend conversations, asking my co-workers personal questions about their lives, their relationships, what they did for fun. The women started dreading seeing his number pop up on the caller ID. The breaking point came about 2 months into this pattern. I was working my usual shift when one of my female co-workers came back from taking a call, looking shaken. She sat down at her station and just stared at her computer screen for a minute before turning to the rest of us. She told us that Gary had crossed a major line during their call. He had asked her what she was wearing, like she had shown up to work in some kind of lingerie instead of normal office clothes. We were all shocked when she described how he kept pushing for details about her outfit, asking if she was wearing a dress and whether her hair was down. She said she tried to redirect the conversation back to his security rounds, but he wouldn't let it go. I could see how uncomfortable the whole interaction had made her. She's a professional woman trying to do her job, not some fantasy object for this creep to harass. Since we work the night shift, there wasn't really anyone from management around she could report this to immediately. By the time her shift ended, she just wanted to go home and try to forget about it. That really bothered me. This woman shouldn't have to deal with sexual harassment just because she answered the phone to do her job. None of my female co-workers should have to put up with that garbage. The next night around 9 p.m. the phone rang. Gary's number showed up on the caller ID and I watched everyone in the room suddenly find something else very important to focus on. Nobody wanted to take his call anymore. Something just snapped in me. I don't even know where the idea came from, but I decided I was going to give Gary a taste of his own medicine. I picked up the phone and completely changed my voice, making it high-pitched and overly flirtatious, like some cartoon character. I greeted him using his ridiculous nickname and made exaggerated comments about his muscles, calling them big and chocolatey. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could feel his discomfort radiating through the phone line. When he finally responded, his voice had completely changed from his usual smooth talking tone to something much more formal and uncomfortable. He told me very stiffly that he had arrived at the property and would be starting his rounds, emphasizing the word "sir" multiple times. He was clearly trying to establish some kind of masculine authority, probably hoping I'd drop whatever game I was playing. But I was just getting started. I kept up the flirty voice and asked him what was wrong, calling him by a cutesy nickname. I told him I was hoping we could keep each other company and have some fun together. I was channeling every cheesy phone hotline voice I'd ever heard in movies, making it as over the top and uncomfortable as possible. By this point, I could tell his ego was taking a serious hit. His response came out aggressive and offended. He told me he didn't know what I'd heard about him, but that he didn't get down like that, and this wasn't that kind of situation. He demanded that I start acting accordingly. Perfect. He was getting exactly the same uncomfortable feeling my female co-workers had been experiencing for months. Time to drive the point home. I dropped the fake voice and spoke in my normal tone, telling him I totally understood. I explained that I wouldn't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable by flirting with them against their will during what should be a professional conversation, and that doing something like that would be really not cool. The message was crystal clear. He went completely quiet for what felt like forever before finally saying he understood. I wished him a good night and hung up. I realized that everyone in the monitoring center had stopped what they were doing to listen to the call. We all just looked at each other for a second before the whole room burst into laughter. A couple of my female co-workers actually came over to thank me for what I'd done. Later that same night, Gary called back for his end-of-shift check-in. The conversation lasted maybe 30 seconds. Professional, concise, no inappropriate comments. That's how his call stayed for the remaining few months until our contract with that property ended. It's been about 4 or 5 years since that night, and I've been promoted into management now. I'm 16 and my parents got divorced a couple of years ago. Mom and I live together during the week, and I visit Dad every Saturday. It's been our routine since the divorce was finalized. Dad remarried about a year ago to this woman who seems nice enough, though I don't know her super well yet. Dad has always been into what he calls pranks, but honestly, they're not really funny to anyone except him. When I was younger, he used to play these videos of cats in heat just to watch our male cat go crazy from the sounds. He'd also put on videos of dogs barking really loud. I never got why that was supposed to be entertaining. Then there were the times he'd switch off the bathroom light while I was using the toilet, leaving me in complete darkness. I'd have to feel around for the switch while trying not to trip over anything. The worst one I remember was when he put this realistic-looking rubber snake right next to Mom while she was sleeping. He knew she had this massive phobia of snakes, like she'd literally scream and cry if she even saw one on TV. When she woke up and saw it, she had a complete panic attack. There was so much shouting that day, and I think that incident was one of the things that really started pushing their marriage toward the end. Last Saturday was different from our usual routine. Instead of going to his place like we always do, Dad texted me asking if we could meet at this coffee shop downtown for lunch. I thought maybe his wife was having friends over or something, so I didn't think much of it. When I got there, Dad was already sitting at a table near the window. He seemed kind of agitated, drumming his fingers on the table and looking around a lot. We ordered our food, and I got an iced latte because it was pretty warm outside. Dad made this snorting sound when he saw my drink and asked me if I was really getting an iced latte. I asked him what was so funny about that, and he said it reminded him of something. Then he told me he had pulled a pretty good prank on my stepmom that morning. Here we go again with another one of his so-called pranks. I just sat there waiting for him to tell me what he did this time. When I asked what he did, he started explaining how my stepmom is vegan, in particular about everything she eats and drinks. He said that morning she had asked him to make her usual latte while she was getting ready for work. Then he told me that instead of using her oat milk like he always does, he used regular whole milk. He said he wanted to see if she could actually tell the difference, or if it was all just in her head. He wondered out loud if being vegan was really that important, or if it was just some trendy thing. I felt my stomach drop a little. I mean, I'm not vegan myself, but I know his wife takes it seriously. It's not just some diet fad for her. She's talked about it before when we've had dinner together, about how it's important to her for ethical reasons. When I asked what happened, Dad started laughing and told me she took one sip and immediately knew something was wrong. He said she started asking him what he put in it, and when he told her it was just a prank, she completely lost it. According to him, she started yelling about how he violated her trust and her beliefs and said he was being disrespectful. He acted like he couldn't believe she was so upset over some milk. Dad was laughing while he told me this, like he expected me to find it as hilarious as he did. But I just felt uncomfortable. This wasn't like his other pranks that were just annoying. This felt different, meaner somehow. He asked me if I thought it was funny and I looked at him and pulled a face. I told him I didn't think so. His expression changed immediately. The smile disappeared and he looked genuinely annoyed with me. He said that people these days just can't take a joke and that everyone's so sensitive about everything. I pointed out that she's vegan for a reason and that he basically tricked her into consuming something she's morally against. He got defensive and said it was just milk and that it wasn't like he poisoned her or something. Then he told me I was his son and supposed to side with him and that I shouldn't be so judgmental when it was completely harmless. I told him it wasn't harmless to her, and that's why he was here with me instead of at home. Dad got quiet for a minute, then started getting more defensive. He said she overreacted and that it was just a test to see if all this vegan stuff was real or just for show. He claimed that now he knew she was serious about it, so mission accomplished. I suggested he could have just asked her about it instead of tricking her. He asked where the fun would be in that, then told me that when I'm older, I'll understand that relationships need some playfulness. He also said my mom never appreciated his sense of humor either. That comment really bothered me. Mom never liked his pranks because they were usually at someone else's expense, just like this one. I told him that maybe his sense of humor was the problem, not everyone else being too sensitive. He said he couldn't believe his own son was lecturing him about his marriage and that I didn't know what it was like being married to someone who takes everything so seriously all the time. I shot back that he didn't know what it was like being married to someone who thinks it's funny to mess with things that are important to you. We finished lunch in awkward silence after that. Dad paid the check without saying much, and when we got outside, he seemed like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. He told me he didn't want us to fight about this and asked if we could just agree to disagree. I said I wasn't fighting with him, but I thought he should apologize to her. He asked me what for, having a sense of humor. I told him for not respecting something that's important to her. He shook his head like I was the one being unreasonable, gave me a quick hug, and said he'd see me next Saturday. When I watched him walk away, I felt sorry for his wife. If he couldn't understand why what he did was wrong, she was probably in for a lot more of these so-called pranks. When I got home, Mom asked how lunch went. I told her about the whole thing, and she just sighed and shook her head. She didn't seem surprised at all. I guess some people never really change, even when their actions push everyone away from them. I just hope Dad figures it out before he loses another relationship over his idea of what's funny. 2 days later, I got a text from Dad asking if I wanted to come over for dinner on Wednesday. I said sure, thinking maybe he had apologized to his wife and things were back to normal. When I got there, I noticed his wife wasn't home. Dad told me she was staying at her sister's place for a few days. He said they had another fight after the milk incident, and she told him she needed some space to think about their relationship. He seemed genuinely confused about why she was so upset and kept asking me if I thought she was overreacting. I told him no, she wasn't overreacting, and that maybe this was his chance to really think about how his pranks affect other people. He got quiet after that and we ate dinner without talking much. When I was leaving, he asked me if I thought his wife would come back. I told him that depended on whether he was willing to change and start respecting her boundaries. He nodded but didn't say anything else. A week later, Mom told me that Dad had called her asking for advice about his marriage. Apparently, his wife had told him she was considering leaving if he couldn't learn to respect her values and stop treating her beliefs like they were a joke. Mom said she told him he needed to grow up and start treating people better if he wanted to keep them in his life. I'm a freelance photographer, and about 2 years ago, I was hired to shoot a corporate event for this tech company downtown. It was one of those networking mixers where everyone pretends to care about synergy while drinking overpriced wine. Pretty standard stuff, really. I was just doing my job, moving around the room, capturing candid shots of people mingling and giving presentations. There was this woman there, probably in her early 30s, who kept positioning herself in my shots. At first, I thought it was just coincidence. You know how some people are naturally photogenic and seem to end up in front of cameras? But when the night went on, I noticed she was deliberately moving into my frame every time I raised my camera. When I'd shift to photograph someone else, she'd follow. When I'd move to a different corner of the room, she'd somehow end up there too. After the event, she approached me and asked for my business card. Nothing unusual about that. Lots of people want photographers for personal events. She mentioned something about needing headshots for work, so I gave her my card and thought nothing of it. That's when things started getting weird. She began calling my business line constantly, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day. The conversations always started normal enough, with her asking about my rates and availability for shoots, but then she'd veer off into personal territory, wanting to know if I was single, what I did for fun, where I lived. I kept trying to steer the conversation back to business, but she'd just ignore my attempts and keep prying. Then the emails started. Long, rambling messages about how we had this connection and how she felt like we were meant to meet. I'd respond professionally, trying to maintain boundaries, but she took any response as encouragement. When I stopped responding altogether, the emails got more frequent and more intense. The breaking point came when she showed up at a wedding I was photographing about 6 months later. She wasn't a guest. She'd somehow found out where I was working and just appeared. The bride and groom were understandably confused when this random woman started following their photographer around, but I managed to have venue security escort her out without making too big a scene. After that incident, I blocked her number and email address. Fast forward to last month. I'm getting married to my longtime girlfriend, someone I've been dating for 3 years. We decided on a small outdoor ceremony in my fiance's family's backyard. Nothing fancy, just close family and friends. String lights in the trees, her grandmother's rose bushes as our backdrop. It was supposed to be perfect and intimate. The day started beautifully. The weather was ideal, everyone was in great spirits, and my bride looked absolutely stunning in her grandmother's vintage dress. I was standing at the makeshift altar with our officiant, watching when the music started, and my bride began her walk down the aisle. She was about halfway to me when chaos erupted. This figure in white came charging from the side yard, screaming at the top of her lungs. At first, I couldn't process what I was seeing. Someone in a wedding dress was running toward us, but my brain couldn't make sense of it because my bride was already walking down the aisle. Then I recognized her. It was the woman from the corporate event, the one who'd been stalking me. She was wearing what looked like a thrift store wedding dress, yellowed with age and too big for her frame, and her hair was wild like she'd been sleeping in her car. Before anyone could react, she body-checked my bride, sending her tumbling into the folding chairs we'd set up for guests. My bride hit the ground hard, and I could hear her cry out in pain. Karen started yelling that I couldn't marry my bride because I belonged to her. She screamed that we were supposed to be together and that this was all wrong. She started walking down the aisle toward me like this was her wedding, her delusion complete. My bride was on the ground, holding her ankle, and our guests were sitting there in shock, not sure if this was some kind of performance art gone wrong. I ran to my bride immediately, dropping to my knees beside her to check if she was okay. She was conscious and talking, but clearly in pain. I asked if she was hurt and if she could move her ankle. She told me she thought it was sprained, but that she was okay, then asked what the hell had just happened. That's when Karen completely lost what little grip on reality she had left. She grabbed a fistful of my hair and started yanking, screaming about how I was supposed to be marrying her, not this other woman. She kept yelling that I had promised her and that I couldn't do this to her. She shrieked that she'd been planning our wedding for months. The pain in my scalp was intense, but I was more concerned about my bride and trying to figure out how to de-escalate this situation. Thankfully, my best man and a couple of my cousins jumped into action. They managed to pry her hands out of my hair and restrain her, but she kept struggling and screaming. My best man shouted for someone to call the police right away. Karen kept fighting against the men holding her, screaming that they needed to let her go because this was her wedding and that I belonged to her. She was thrashing around so violently that it took 3 grown men to keep her contained. My bride's sister, who's a nurse, was checking my bride's ankle while I called 911. The whole scene was surreal. Our beautiful, peaceful ceremony had turned into something out of a nightmare. The police arrived within 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. Karen was still ranting about our relationship and how my bride had stolen me from her. The officers had to physically carry her to the patrol car because she refused to walk. One of the police officers asked if I knew this woman. I explained that she'd been stalking me for almost 2 years and that I had only hired her company for a photography job once, after which she became obsessed. The officer took our statements while the paramedics checked my bride's ankle. Thankfully, it was just a sprain, nothing broken. But our wedding day was effectively ruined. 2 days later, we got a call from the detective handling the case. They'd executed a search warrant on Karen's apartment, and what they found was absolutely terrifying. Her bedroom walls were covered with photos of me, pictures she'd somehow taken without my knowledge, printouts from my business website, even screenshots from my social media accounts. She had wedding planning materials scattered everywhere, all centered around a fantasy wedding to me. The detective told us that she had detailed plans for our ceremony. She knew the time, location, everything. She'd been watching me for months, learning my schedule and routine. Apparently, she'd been following me to various jobs, learning my schedule, and had somehow found out about the wedding through social media posts from my fiancé's family members. The level of planning and surveillance was genuinely frightening. Karen was charged with stalking, assault, and trespassing. During her court appearance, she showed no remorse and kept insisting that I had led her on and that we were destined to be together. The judge ordered a psychological evaluation and issued a restraining order. My bride and I ended up having a small ceremony the following weekend with just immediate family. It wasn't the wedding we'd planned, but honestly, after everything we'd been through, just being able to say our vows in peace felt like a victory. Karen got sentenced to 2 years in prison and mandatory psychiatric treatment. I grew up learning that gifts were about showing people you cared. My parents taught me to pay attention to what mattered to someone. Every holiday season, I spent weeks thinking about what to get everyone. For my dad, I found rare vinyl records of bands he loved. For my mom, I got specialty tees from a shop 2 towns over. For my sister, I hunted down limited edition books from her favorite authors. It wasn't about the price tag. It was about the effort. This worked fine for years. Everyone seemed happy with their gifts, and I was happy making them happy. But then something shifted about 3 years ago. It started at a family dinner in October. My aunt and uncle were there, along with my 2 cousins. We were talking about the upcoming holidays when my aunt suddenly put down her fork and made this big announcement. She said she'd been thinking about how we put too much emphasis on material things during the holidays. My uncle agreed with her, adding that it was really about spending time together, not about expensive gifts. Then my aunt dropped the bomb. She told everyone that they decided not to spend more than $5 on anyone's gift this year. I looked around the table. My parents seemed a bit surprised, but they nodded politely. My sister shot me a look that said everything without words. My older cousin chimed in, saying it was better for the environment too, less consumerism and all that. The younger one added that it would teach us to appreciate the little things. They went on and on about how meaningful this would be, how it would bring us closer as a family, how we should all join them in this $5 limit. The whole speech was dressed up in this fake wisdom about family values and togetherness. But here's the thing. My aunt and uncle both had great jobs. My uncle was a regional manager at some tech company, and my aunt worked in real estate. My cousins were both in college but had no student loans because their parents paid for everything. This wasn't about money being tight. My mom tried to be diplomatic, saying it was an interesting idea and maybe we could think about it. But my aunt wouldn't let it go. She insisted that we should all do this, that it would mean so much more if everyone participated. They kept pushing, and eventually everyone kind of mumbled their agreement just to move on from the conversation. I didn't say anything. I just sat there thinking about how convenient this was for them. Christmas came around, and sure enough, my aunt, uncle, and cousins showed up with their $5 gifts. My aunt gave my mom a single cheap candle that smelled like fake vanilla. My uncle gave my dad a package of generic socks. My cousins handed out lottery tickets to everyone. Meanwhile, they opened their gifts from the rest of us. My mom had gotten my aunt an expensive silk scarf she'd been admiring. My dad gave my uncle a bottle of scotch he'd been wanting. I'd gotten my cousins both some nice electronics accessories they'd mentioned needing. My aunt gushed about how lovely the scarf was, saying we shouldn't have. But there was this look in her eyes. Not gratitude, satisfaction, like she'd just won something. My uncle thanked us for the scotch, calling it fantastic. They went home that night with arms full of nice gifts, having spent maybe $20 total on everyone. I watched them load up their car and felt my blood boil. My sister came up beside me and said what we were both thinking. It was complete nonsense. She asked if I was going to say something about it. I told her not yet, but that next year was going to be different. I spent the entire next year planning. Every time I was out shopping and saw something perfectly useless and cheap, I'd grab it. A plastic banana slicer, a special funnel for filling ice cube trays, a device that was supposed to help you put toothpaste on your toothbrush, a set of paper clip shaped like tiny hands, the ugliest keychain I could find, a single chopstick holder, things that technically cost money but served no actual purpose. I wrapped each item beautifully, really went all out with the presentation. Nice paper, elegant bows, the works. I wanted them to be excited when they saw these packages. Christmas came again. My aunt and uncle showed up with their $5 gifts again. More candles, more socks, more lottery tickets. They'd stuck to their philosophy at least. When it came time to exchange gifts, I made sure to give them theirs in front of everyone. My aunt opened hers first. She pulled out the banana slicer and asked what it was. I explained that it was a banana slicer, and just like she'd asked, it was under $5, but still very useful. I described how you just put the banana in and press down to get perfectly even slices every time. I asked if that wasn't great, saying she'd never have uneven banana slices again. Her face was frozen in this weird smile. My uncle said something about how practical it seemed. My uncle opened his gift next, the toothpaste helper. I got excited again, telling him how amazing it was. I explained that you clip it to your toothpaste tube and it helps squeeze out the perfect amount every time. I told him how lucky he was, that these were hard to find and that it was going to change his whole morning routine. He said he was sure it would, but his voice was flat. My cousins opened theirs. One got the ice cube tray funnel, the other got the paper clips. I went into detail about how incredible those paper clips were, how they were shaped like little hands, so when you clip papers together, it looks like tiny hands are holding them. I said they were super useful for organizing documents. Then I turned to my other cousin and explained that the funnel meant no more spilled water when filling ice cube trays. I reminded them that they'd specifically asked for gifts under $5, so I'd made sure everything was within budget but still practical. The room was silent. My parents were trying not to laugh. My sister had her hand over her mouth. My aunt's face had gone bright red. She said quietly that it was certainly something. I responded cheerfully that I was just following their philosophy, giving gifts under $5 that bring us together. I asked if this wasn't better than materialism. She didn't say anything, just gathered up her things quickly. They left early that night, barely saying goodbye. But you know what? The next year, nobody mentioned the $5 limit. My aunt and uncle showed up with normal gifts. Not extravagant, but actual thoughtful presents. We never talked about what happened. I work on the back-end systems, mostly database optimization and API development. It's the kind of work that doesn't really require face-to-face interaction. I can do everything I need from my home office, which is really just my spare bedroom with a desk and 2 monitors. Our team communicates mainly through chat applications. Quick questions, updates, file sharing, all of that happens in text. When we need to actually meet, it's usually audio calls with screen sharing, Someone presents their work, we discuss it, make decisions, and move on. It works fine. We're productive, we hit our deadlines, and nobody has to pretend to enjoy small talk by the coffee machine. Then, about 2 months ago, we got a new program manager. He came from a different division, one that apparently still does things the old fashioned way. He's the type who talks about synergy and thinks every problem can be solved with more meetings. Nobody on the team likes him much, but he's management, so we deal with it. His latest thing is insisting everyone turn their cameras on during meetings. He keeps saying it's for better communication, that he needs to see our faces to gauge our reactions, that it builds team cohesion. Most of us think it's nonsense. We've been working just fine without cameras for years, but he's been getting more insistent about it, bringing it up at the start of every meeting. Today was different though. Today he decided to single people out. The meeting started like usual. Tuesday afternoon, 2 o'clock, status update meeting that could have been an email, but he insists on doing it live every week. I logged in, audio only, like always. My camera was off. I was wearing a comfortable golf polo, one with thin horizontal stripes in blue and white that I'd picked up at a thrift store a few months back. Comfortable, casual, perfect for working from home. The meeting got going and he started his usual spiel about wanting everyone to turn their cameras on. He went on about how it really helps with communication and makes the meeting feel more real and personal. Silence followed. Nobody turned their cameras on. This happened every week. He'd ask, we'd ignore it. He'd eventually give up and move on. But not today. He said he noticed several people still didn't have cameras on and wanted to be more direct about it. Then he called me out by name, asking me to turn my camera on. He said he wanted to see the team he was working with. I felt my jaw tighten. I could have refused. I could have made an excuse about my camera not working or my internet being slow. But something about the way he said it, like he was a school teacher scolding a child, made me angry. So I turned my camera on. The effect was immediate. Someone asked what was happening with the screen. Another person wondered if it was my shirt causing the problem. The stripes on my polo were creating this wild visual effect through the camera. Every tiny movement I made caused these rippling waves across the screen, a moire pattern that seemed to pulse and shift. It was mesmerizing in the most annoying way possible. The program manager pointed out that my shirt was causing some kind of interference with the camera and that it was very distracting. I asked if it was really that bad, saying I hadn't noticed. Then I reminded him that he was the one who wanted cameras on. Someone else chimed in saying it was like an optical illusion and that it was actually hurting their eyes a little. Another person agreed, saying it was pretty intense. I shifted in my chair, adjusting my position. The pattern danced and swirled across their screens. Someone said it was definitely making them dizzy. The program manager suggested that maybe I could change my shirt. I pointed out that we were 40 minutes into a 1-hour meeting and thought we should just continue. I asked if he didn't agree, reminding him that he wanted to see better communication. I said here I was, communicating. I could hear the frustration in his voice when he said this was exactly why they needed to have professional standards for these meetings. I responded by saying I was wearing a normal shirt in my own home office. I said it wasn't my fault the camera didn't like the pattern, but I said sure I'd keep my camera on since he insisted. For the rest of the meeting I made sure to move regularly, reaching for my water bottle, adjusting my chair, leaning forward to type. Every movement created that hypnotic, annoying pattern. I could see in the tiny preview window how obnoxious it was. People kept getting distracted. The meeting that should have taken an hour stretched to 75 minutes because nobody could focus. When the program manager finally wrapped things up, he said that was everything and reminded everyone about the same time next week. I said it sounded good and that I'd make sure my camera was ready to go. After the meeting ended, my chat application exploded with private messages from co-workers. Most of them were laughing. A few sent me thumbs up emojis. One person sent me a link to buy more striped shirts. I went to my closet after the call and counted. I have 4 more polo shirts with similar patterns. Thin stripes, checks, small repeating geometric designs. Every single one of them will create that same effect on camera. I'm already planning what to wear for next Tuesday's meeting. And maybe I'll mention that I've been meaning to organize my shirt collection, so I might be wearing these shirts for the next several weeks. After all, he wanted cameras on for better communication. I'm just trying to be a team player and give him what he asked for. If the result is a bit visually chaotic, well, that's just an unfortunate side effect of his policy. I have a feeling he might reconsider his camera requirement very soon, or at least he'll think twice before calling people out by name. Either way, I'm looking forward to next week's meeting more than I have in months. I've already laid out my shirt for next Tuesday. It's a lovely one with thin vertical stripes this time, alternating between black and white. I tested it on my camera earlier, and the effect is even better than today's shirt. The pattern practically vibrates on screen. I also went ahead and ordered 3 more shirts online, and they should arrive by the end of the week. One has a houndstooth pattern, another has tiny checkered squares, and the third has diagonal stripes. I figure if I'm going to do this, I might as well commit fully to it. A few of my co-workers have already messaged me privately saying they're planning to find similar shirts of their own. One guy said that he has an old sweater with a zigzag pattern that he's been dying to wear. Another person mentioned they have a dress shirt covered in tiny crosses that creates a similar effect. It seems like the whole team is getting in on this now. The program manager has no idea what's coming. Next week's meeting is going to be absolutely glorious. I can already picture it. 5 or 6 of us with our cameras on, all wearing the most visually chaotic patterns we can find. The screen will look like a kaleidoscope. Nobody will be able to concentrate on anything he says. Maybe then he'll realize that some policies aren't worth enforcing. Maybe he'll understand that we had a good system going and he should have left well enough alone. Or maybe he'll just suffer through it week after week, too stubborn to back down from his demand. Either way, I win. Because even if he doesn't change the policy, I get to sit in my comfortable home office wearing my comfortable shirts, knowing that I'm driving him crazy just by existing on camera. It's the perfect form of malicious compliance. He asked for cameras on, and that's exactly what he's getting. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.